The first time my cat chose him over me, I almost called the police. The second time, I started to wonder if maybe my cat just had better taste in men than I did. Evan Miller. That was his name. The neighbor I'd never spoken to until I found my mischievous tabby, Clover, stretched out on his porch like she'd found her new kingdom. He opened the door in ripped jeans and a tired gray t-shirt, hair messy from sleep, and when he bent to scoop up my cat, Clover purred so loudly it was like betrayal in stereo. "You lost something?" he asked, eyes narrowing at me with an expression that wasn't exactly friendly. "My cat," I said flatly, reaching out my hands. Clover didn't move. Of course she didn't. She curled deeper into his chest like she'd found her soulmate and I was just the guy who refilled the food bowl. That was the start. That ridiculous, infuriating, strangely electric start. Evan lived 2 houses down, in one of those old brick homes with a porch swing that creaked in the wind. I'd moved into the neighborhood 6 months earlier, freshly relocated from Chicago, nursing a failed engagement and a bitterness I kept buried under late-night shifts and takeout containers. I wasn't looking for friends. Definitely not for neighbors who made me feel like I was the intruder when it was clearly my damn cat. But Clover kept sneaking out, and every time, I'd find her there perched on his windowsill, or curled on his couch, or sprawled in his lap while he read on the porch. We argued about it the third time. "She seems to like me," he said, stroking her head. "She's my cat," I snapped. "She doesn't act like it." The nerve. The absolute, infuriating nerve. Yet here's the part one still don't understand. Somewhere between the arguments about cat custody and the awkward exchanges on his porch, I started noticing things I shouldn't. The way his laugh came rare but genuine, breaking through that gruff exterior. The way he smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. The scar along his left wrist that he tried to hide when he handed Clover back to me. I told myself it was nothing, just neighborly curiosity. Except it wasn't, because one night Clover didn't come home at all. I stormed over, ready to unleash hell, only to find the lights out and the door half open. My chest tightened, irrational panic clawing at me. I knocked, louder than necessary, and when Evan finally appeared, his eyes were red-rimmed, his expression raw. Clover was in his arms, asleep, her purring filling the silence between us. She helped, he said softly, like the words weighed more than he wanted me to know. And for the first time, I didn't argue. We didn't talk about it that night, or the night after, but something shifted, undeniable and dangerous. Every stolen glance carried more weight. Every sarcastic jab between us rang with something unsaid. The neighborhood gossips would have had a field day if they saw the way my heart sped up when he stepped closer, or the way my fingers lingered when I took Clover back from his arms. Because in our quiet suburban street, people didn't like men who looked at each other the way I was starting to look at him. And yet I couldn't stop. The 4th time Clover snuck away, I didn't go to retrieve her. I sat at my window instead, staring at the faint glow from his house. Waiting, hoping, terrified, because it wasn't about the cat anymore. It was about the way Evan looked at me like I wasn't invisible. Like maybe, just maybe, I was worth being chosen too. By the 5th time Clover disappeared, I didn't bother pretending it was about her anymore. It was late summer, cicadas buzzing so loud they drowned out the silence between houses. I left my door open, heart pounding like it was expecting something or something happen. When I finally walked down the street and up Evan's steps, I already knew I'd find her sprawled across his lap like a tiny furry traitor. But I didn't expect the way he looked at me that night. Tired, hollow-eyed, as if he'd been carrying the weight of 1,000 storms. "Do you ever wonder?" he said suddenly, his voice low and rough. "Why she keeps coming here?" I opened my mouth with the usual retort, but the words fell flat. Because the truth was gnawing at me. Maybe it wasn't just about Clover. Maybe she was the bridge, the excuse, the stubborn little messenger dragging us into each other's worlds whether we liked it or not. "She's persistent," I muttered. "So am I," he said, almost too quiet for me to hear. "We didn't kiss that night. I thought about it, though God, I thought about it." When he handed Clover back, our fingers brushed, and it was like touching an exposed wire. His eyes flicked to mine, then away, and the silence stretched so long it felt like another kind of confession. But we didn't break it. Not yet. Instead, I walked home with Clover in my arms, my chest tight, my mind on fire with all the things I didn't know how to say. The next week, it got worse. I'd see him mowing his lawn, sweat running down his neck, his shirt clinging to his back. I'd see him on the porch with a beer, Clover curled like a queen in his lap, his hand absently stroking her fur. And every time, my pulse betrayed me. Every damn time. One night, frustration got the better of me. "Do you even have a job?" I blurted as I walked past his yard, Clover trotting ahead like she belonged there. His head jerked up. "Excuse me? You're always home, always with my cat. Don't you have something better to do?" He stood, slow and deliberate, setting the beer bottle down. The porch light cut across his face, highlighting the sharp edges of his jaw. "I work nights," he said, his voice clipped. "Construction. 12-hour shifts. You think I want to spend my free time babysitting your runaway cat?" The shame hit before I could swallow it. "I didn't know," he cut in, his voice quieter now but harder. "You didn't think. You just assumed." I wanted to argue, to fight, to claw back some of the pride I felt slipping through my fingers. But then Clover rubbed against his leg, and his expression cracked for just a moment. He crouched to scoop her up, pressing his face into her fur like she was the only softness in his world. And that's when I saw the exhaustion, the loneliness, the bruised kind of grief people carry when they've lost too much. I didn't say another word. 2 nights later, I found myself back on his porch, heart in my throat. I told myself I was there for Clover. But when he opened the door, hair damp from the shower, t-shirt hanging loose, the only thing I could think was how badly I wanted to know him. Really know him. "Beer?" he asked, surprising me. I hesitated, then nodded. We sat on the swing, Clover between us, her purr a steady soundtrack. The cicadas hummed. The night stretched open. "I used to have a dog," he said after a long silence. "Golden retriever. She died last year. House hasn't felt the same since." I glanced at him, at the shadow in his eyes. "I'm sorry." He shrugged, but the weight in his voice betrayed him. "Guess that's why Clover likes it here. Fills the quiet." My throat tightened. For once, I didn't make a joke. Didn't argue. "She likes you," I said softly. "Maybe more than me." He gave a small, sad smile. "She's got good instincts." The words landed between us, heavy and electric. After that night, something shifted. I stopped pretending to be annoyed when Clover wandered off. I stopped pretending I didn't notice the way Evan's hand brushed mine when he passed her over, or how his voice softened when he said my name. We were orbiting closer, inch by inch, like 2 planets too stubborn to admit gravity was pulling them together. But the world has sharp edges, and it didn't take long for those edges to cut. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. I was tossing a ball for Clover in my yard when I heard voices, harsh, biting voices coming from his porch. A man stood there, older, broad-shouldered, his face twisted with anger. "You think hiding out here makes you any less of a disgrace?" the man snapped. Evan's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. "Leave, Dad." The word hit me like a stone. His father. "I didn't raise you for this," the older man spat, his gaze flicking toward me, then back to his son. "Mooning over some guy," letting the whole neighborhood whisper pathetic. My chest burned, fury mixing with something sharper, more fragile. But before I could step in, Evan spoke, his voice steady, even if his hands trembled at his sides. "You didn't raise me at all." The silence that followed was brutal. His father's face reddened, veins standing out on his neck. For a moment I thought he'd swing, but instead, he turned on his heel, spitting curses under his breath, and stalked off into the night. Evan stood frozen on the porch, chest heaving. Clover meowed, padding toward him, nudging his leg. And me? I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because I'd just seen the storm he carried and I wasn't sure if I was brave enough to walk into it. But later, when I found him sitting alone on the porch swing, head in his hands, Clover curled in his lap. I knew the truth. I wanted to be brave. For him. For us. Even if it meant facing every whisper, every glare, every slammed door the world had to offer. Because somewhere between all the stolen cats and stolen glances, I'd already chosen him. The night his father stormed off, Evan didn't speak. He sat there on that swing like a man carved out of stone, every muscle tense, every breath forced. I wanted to touch him, to say something anything that might ease the weight pressing down on him. But the silence was thick, choking, and I was afraid of breaking it wrong. Finally, he lifted his head. His eyes glistened, not quite tears but close enough that my chest ached. You saw that, he said, voice low, flat. Yeah, I answered. And now you know what kind of man I come from. I shook my head before I even realized it. That wasn't about you. That was about him. But Evan's bitter smile told me he didn't believe it. Maybe, or maybe he's right. Maybe I am pathetic. The word stung, too close to the bone. Because I knew what it was like to wear other people's judgments like they were carved into your skin. You're not pathetic, I said firmly. You're braver than you know. His gaze flicked to me then, sharp, searching, like he wanted to call me a liar but couldn't quite bring himself to. Clover stretched in his lap, yawning like she was the only one unbothered by the storm. For a moment we just stared at each other. The porch creaked. The cicadas screamed. My heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. And then, without warning, he stood. I can't, he stopped, running a hand through his hair. I don't do this. I don't let people in. Then don't, I said, my voice cracking. Just, don't push me out either. The words hung there, trembling between us. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. Evan still showed up on his porch sometimes, Clover loyally hopping onto his lap. But he didn't invite me over, didn't offer a beer, didn't even glance my way when I passed. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, like I'd been let in for a second, only to have the door slammed shut again. But then, one evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find him standing there, hair damp, hoodie unzipped, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Clover was at his feet, tail flicking like she'd orchestrated the whole damn thing. Can I come in? He asked. My throat tightened. I nodded. He didn't sit at first, just paced, restless, like his skin didn't fit right. I'm not good at this, he muttered. Talking, explaining, any of it. Then don't explain, I said quietly. Just be here. Something in my voice must have reached him, because he finally sat on the edge of my couch, elbows on his knees. He stared at the floor for a long time, then said, My mom left when I was 10. My dad. He wasn't the kind of man who knew how to raise a kid on his own. Especially a son who. He trailed off, jaw tightening. I held my breath. Especially a son who wasn't what he wanted. He finished, bitterness dripping from every word. My chest ached. So he tried to beat it out of you. Evan's silence was answer enough. I wanted to reach for him then, but my hands stayed frozen in my lap, because this was a wound so raw, so bleeding, that touching it might break him. Instead, I said, he doesn't get to decide who you are, or who you love. The word hung between us like a live wire. Love. Neither of us had said it yet, but it was there. It had been there from the moment Clover first curled up in his arms and refused to let go. His head snapped up, eyes locking with mine. And for once, he didn't look away. That was the night we kissed. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't practiced. It was desperate, messy, all teeth and trembling hands like we were both terrified it would vanish if we didn't hold on tight enough. I tasted salt, realized only later that he'd been crying. His fingers dug into my hoodie, clinging like I was the only anchor he had left. When we finally broke apart, gasping, Clover meowed loudly from the armrest as if to remind us she was still there. We both laughed, shaky, startled, but real. And in that laughter, I felt something break open. Something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next weeks blurred into something I hadn't dared imagine. Dinners shared at my kitchen table. Long walks down the quiet street. Clover trailing behind like a furry chaperone. Evenings spent on his porch swing, our knees brushing, silence comfortable for the first time. But the world wasn't blind. Neighbors noticed. Whispers grew. A woman across the street stopped waving. An older man muttered something under his breath as we passed. Evan stiffened every time. His jaw would set, his fists clench, but he never let go of my hand when I offered it. And that, more than anything, told me how much he'd changed. Of course, change doesn't come without a price. It happened one night at the grocery store. We were in line, joking quietly about which brand of cat food Clover liked better, when a man behind us muttered, "Disgusting." The word sliced through the air. Evan froze. My stomach lurched. But before I could react, Evan turned, his voice steady but firm. "You got something to say? Say it to my face." The man sneered, but didn't answer. He looked away. Evan turned back, his hand brushing mine, grounding me. And in that moment I knew. This wasn't just about a cat anymore. It wasn't even about us against his father or the neighborhood or the whispers. It was about choosing each other. Every day, no matter the cost. The first time I woke up with him beside me, I thought it was a dream. The sunlight had just begun to creep through the blinds, dust motes dancing in the air. Evan lay sprawled on his stomach, one arm draped over my waist, his face pressed into the pillow. His breathing was deep, steady, and Clover traitor that she was, had curled up neatly on his back like she'd claimed him forever. And maybe she had. Maybe we both had. I lay there for a long time, afraid that moving would break whatever spell had been cast over us. But the truth was, the spell wasn't fragile anymore. It wasn't an illusion that could vanish with the morning light. It was real. Of course, reality isn't without its battles. The whispers in the neighborhood didn't stop. His father didn't suddenly change into a man who could love him as he was. And my past, the failed engagement, the scars of never being enough didn't magically disappear. But something shifted. We started living in the in-betweens. Between the stares at the grocery store, there were nights of cooking dinner together, our shoulders bumping in the kitchen. Between the harsh words of others, there were mornings like this, where Clover's purring was the only soundtrack to our silence. Between the fear of being seen, there was the thrill of holding his hand in public, even if it was just for a second. Love wasn't perfect, but it was ours. One evening, weeks later, I found Evan on his porch swing again. This time, his shoulders weren't tight with tension. He sat relaxed, Clover stretched across his lap, the fading sunlight softening the lines of his face. When I joined him, he didn't say a word at first. He just reached out, fingers finding mine, holding on. Then, quietly, he said, "I used to think I wasn't worth much, that maybe my dad was right about me. But with you, I feel like I can breathe." My throat tightened. "You are worth everything, Evan. You always were. You just needed someone to remind you." He turned then, eyes meeting mine, vulnerable and unguarded in a way that made my chest ache. And that was the night he told me he loved me. No grand gestures, no fireworks, just the steady, trembling truth of it, whispered into the summer air like a secret finally set free. The custody battle over Clover ended the only way it could. We stopped pretending she belonged to just one of us. She belonged to both. To all three of us. Realize a little family stitched together out of broken pieces and stubborn hope. Neighbors still whispered. His father still lurked like a shadow at the edges of our lives. But the difference was we weren't facing it alone anymore. And slowly, little by little, the world seemed to soften. The woman across the street waved again one morning. A man at the hardware store smiled and asked how the two of you were doing. Acceptance didn't arrive all at once, but in small, steady drops. And each one mattered. Months later, on a crisp autumn morning, we stood at the end of his driveway. Clover twined between our legs, chasing leaves as they tumbled across the pavement. Evan slipped his hand into mine, no hesitation, no glance around to see who was watching. Just us. "I used to hate this neighborhood," I admitted, watching the sunlight hit the houses, the trees ablaze with color. "And now?" he asked. "Now it feels like home." He smiled then, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, that stripped away years of pain and left only light. And in that moment I knew, we weren't just surviving anymore. We were living, together. Love doesn't erase the past. It doesn't silence every whisper or fix every wound. But it gives you something stronger than all of its something worth holding on to. And as Clover darted ahead, leading us back toward the house we now shared, I realized that my cat had known the truth from the start. She hadn't just been sneaking into Evan's house. She'd been leading me home. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.